Hello, everybody. Welcome. Evan here, and happy Leap Day to everybody. February 29th only comes around once every 4 years, so a special occasion for more than one reason. As it turns out, in terms of comic books, it's a big day. I didn't even realize this till about an hour ago, but apparently February 29th is the character of Superman's birthday. So not like the official publication first on sale date. That's like sometime in April or May, depending on who you ask. And actually, Clark Kent, the character, has a different birthday as well. Like if we look at different DC comics over the years, they say, Clark Kent he landed on Earth on June 10th as an infant, and the Kents like adopted him and found him June 18th. So that changes a bit, but at least in terms of Superman, the character, again, his birthday is February 29th. So that's interesting. And if not this one, if it wasn't this year, then the next leap year, the next, 2024, will finally be when Superman is, if we go back to the 30s, like officially he'll be 21 years old and he can have a drink. But again, that's if we assume he was, growing up in the 1930s. It's a sliding timeline, so it's probably changed. But anyway, I realized that rather late in the day today, so it was too late to get going on a Superman drawing. I've actually got one that I did before that I'll show here in a bit, but I'm starting today by drawing a Spawn and Spider-Man mashup. Because if you hadn't heard that news, that's also been going around. Todd McFarlane, creator of Spawn and one of the most famous artists for Spider-Man, drew these characters together for the first time ever for a professional publication. So that's kind of interesting. And I thought, up until I learned about Superman's birthday, I was like, okay, that's the best thing to go with in terms of news and art for the weekend. So I'll go with that. And then I got blindsided by the news that Superman's birthday was also the 29th. So the best laid plans of mice and men and so on. But welcome to everybody. And looking at the chat already, we got a comment from Caleb Richardson saying, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. And also, I wouldn't mind a Superman movie that takes place in the 30s and 40s. And you know what? I think that's a good idea. Not the last one, but the Bryan Singer film, Superman Returns, kind of had, to an extent, like sort of a 30s and 40s aesthetic to like the architecture and the costumes and even the cars a little bit. It wasn't perfect, but it kind of had like a timeless quality to the metropolis in that movie. Outside of, some things like a passenger airline. That certainly wasn't something I think was going on. Maybe, I don't know. I don't think that was super popular in the 1930s though. But yeah, that would be interesting if they did more of the sort of original Superman aesthetic for a new Superman film. Speaking of Superman films, though, there's also news. I've heard that we're getting closer and closer to release of the Snyder Cut for Justice League. I don't know what the latest development is on that. I mean, it would not be exactly, it's definitely not like the 30s and 40s Superman style, we'll say that. So if that's coming out, they're getting further and further away from Caleb, what you're looking for, and also I'll say what I'm looking for. But that'd be a great idea. I would watch that movie if it was the 30s and 40s style. So again, what I'm drawing here is this is kind of a mashup of, I hope you can tell, Spider-Man and Spawn. I showed it to Alana earlier today, and I was like, you know who these characters are, right? She's like, yeah, definitely. That's Spider-Man and Deadpool. And I was like, perfect, exactly right. But it's funny, even mentioning Deadpool, like that character, Rob Liefeld developed the character of Deadpool back in the late 80s, early 90s, in part, I believe, because Todd McFarlane, who was the Spider-Man artist at the time, was bragging about he's got a character in Spider-Man where it's like you don't really have to draw a lot of facial features. So it really makes it easier to get through those deadlines when you're working on the comic. So Rob Liefeld was in part inspired by the look of characters like Spider-Man with Deadpool, that sort of mask with like the large eyes, but not a lot of other facial features. because frankly, it's easier to draw and it's fun to draw. Plenty of artists will tell you, plenty of professional artists, not just me, will say that Spider-Man is, he's got the perfect costume. He's just one of the best superheroes there is. He's so much fun to draw. So a lot of credit, I think, goes to the original designer. I want to say Steve Ditko, although there's conflicting reports. I think Jack Kirby is on record as saying that he designed Spider-Man originally. But whoever it was, Ditko or Kirby, give him credit for an incredible costume design that has totally withstood the test of time. And, it's been, in Spawn's case, we're getting up on almost 3 decades now of Spawn with a fairly consistent character design. So kudos to Todd McFarlane for that as well. And also, great work. If you haven't seen, just Google it. The Overstreet cover for Spawn and Spider-Man by McFarlane. It's been making the rounds. It's a news story in and of itself, just that McFarlane is drawing these characters together for the first time ever, even if it's just for the cover of a price guide. I wonder, though, will we ever get a proper Spider-Man and Spawn crossover? It's been a while, I think almost decades at this point, multiple decades, since there's been like a crossover between Spawn and any of the mainstream characters, Marvel or DC. Because I'm thinking back, the big one was Spawn and Batman that came out like 94. And that was awesome because it was, Frank Miller writing it, Todd McFarlane drawing it. And if you remember, the way that deal went with DC at the time was basically Todd got one, Image Comics got to do one, and DC got to do one. And Todd pulled out all the stops. When he did Spawn Batman, his one-shot title, crossover, it was him drawing it, Steve Olive coloring it, and Frank Miller writing it. So the best of the best at every level working on that. And then on the other hand, a good roster of talent, but what the Batman Spawn, I think it was called War Devil issue, was like written by Chuck Dixon, and with inks by Klaus Janson, and I forget exactly who did the pencils. I want to say Graham Nolan, but maybe not. It's like they're good, but it's like it's not even like A-list caliber. It's like S-tier caliber on the Image Comics side when you got Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane teaming up. But I mentioned all that just to say, like, if we were going to get a Spawn Spider-Man crossover, I think in all likelihood it would be a similar deal where Todd would be like, okay, I'll do one. I'll publish one Image. Marvel can publish one, and we'll see, ultimately whose is better. And I don't know. I mean, Marvel might be competitive. Like, I think Joe Quesada, like, let's say he's like a current vice president at Marvel, but he's also known for being a great artist himself. Like, if he did the Marvel side, if he did the Spider-Man Spawn, the Marvel issue of that would be incredible. If, put that up side by side with, let's assume Todd draws the Image Comics one. They'd both be pretty fantastic. And then, like, writing it, who would be best? I wonder, Todd wrote a lot of Spider-Man comics himself. He might do it himself. But he also worked with David Michelini back on Amazing Spider-Man back in the day. And I know they're friendly. Like, I saw them at a convention together in the last year or two, and like they were saying hello, chatting each other up. But I wonder, would Todd have David come in and write a Spawn Spider-Man crossover for old time's sake? It'd be interesting, but I don't know that we're very close to a Spawn Spider-Man crossover even happening. So don't let me get anyone's hopes up. Checking out on the chat again, Caleb's also saying, fun fact, Superman Returns was supposed to take place in the 90s as it was a spiritual sequel to the Superman from 1978 and Superman 2 from the same time period. But WB didn't want to shell out for creating 90s tech, so it's a mix. You know what? That makes sense. I get that, and that is a fun fact. I like that. I rewatched, it's been a while since I've watched Superman Returns, but I watched the original, the 78 Superman on 4K recently, on the 4K disc, and it still looks great. It's an amazing movie, really holds up, stands the test of time. Love that one. Back for a second to talking about Todd and Spider-Man. I would also think it would be interesting. Let me see, gotta find the right marker here. Todd has talked in interviews before about like what it would take, like in the last year or two. People are always asking him, will you ever work for Marvel again? And he's got like sort of this canned or pat answer where he's like, it's kind of like going back to high school. I graduated high school. Why would I go back? It's weird. But he would, it's like he'll never say never on ultimately doing a Spawn Spider-Man crossover. But it's almost like a magic bullet where like, why would he pull it out of his hat? He's got that trick to go for, and people will want it. People will line up and make it sell like gangbusters if he actually did draw Spawn and Spider-Man together. But once you do it, then it's like he said, what do you do the next month? After that sells out in January, what are you going to do for February or whatever the month is? But he also made an interesting point. This is a year or two ago in an interview, I think for CBR is where I read this, where he talked about, he's got a skill. It's a little tougher for maybe comic book writers. They can like sign a script, and some do. Some will sell you like signed scripts at conventions. But like as an artist, you've got this skill that people will always want, and it's like as long as he can draw roughly a pretty good, like Venom head sketch or Spider-Man head sketch, he'll always be in demand. So he doesn't really have to worry about sort of mandatory or forced retirement. And so he's like, I think he's saying to a degree, like he's willing, or he's saying, I'll be able until like I'm in my 90s if they need me to come out and do a Spawn Spider-Man crossover, if it comes to that. But I don't know. Caleb's also saying, what WB is not that big a fan of period pieces. Take Harry Potter, for example. The first two movies are definitively set in the 90s tech, cars, etc. But in the third movie, WB started to mix modern tech into the movie. Flat screens, cell phones, etc. Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me, sometimes it's not on purpose. Like if you're a fan of the Fast and Furious movies like I am, the third one, Tokyo Drift, is supposed to take place like after the sixth film. But it's funny because like all the tech in Tokyo Drift, which was filmed in like 2006, 2005, is like that sort of mid-2000s tech, especially with the cell phones, where everyone's got like a flip phone. And, by the time that movie was actually set in continuity, it would be more accurate for everyone to have like an iPhone or smartphone. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. And the other thing is, like with old movies, it's always funny to watch old movies and figure out like, okay, what plot points could have been, very quickly solved by a cell phone conversation. Like, what was the movie? I was watching something from the early 90s the other day, and it was like, it might have been like Batman Returns. But yeah, something from the 90s where it was just like, there's a lot of confusion here about where you're supposed to be, but you'd be able to figure it out with a cell phone. That's just the way these things go. But yeah, it's funny that WB is not that big a fan of period pieces. I was not aware of that. So the other stuff, if you're a big fan of like McFarlane and Spawn news, is Toy Fair was this last week. And at this point, most of Todd McFarlane's vast fortune, his dynastic wealth, we would have to say, comes more from, at this point, the toys rather than the comics. And this is just according to CelebrityNetWorth.com. I was just looking at this site the other day because like Whitney Cummings and David Spade were talking about it on a podcast. So I was looking at the website and I was looking up like comic artists. And some of the richer ones, like the other Image guys, Mark Silvestri, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, they kind of top out in like the tens of millions, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's still very impressive. They've got that much, like 10, 12, 14 million. And even Stan Lee, I think, one of the most famous names in comics is, I forget exactly where, but at the time of his passing, he was up in maybe, say, the 30s or 40s, 40 million, maybe at the most. But McFarlane, just going off that website, has a net worth apparently in the $300 to $400 million range. And I think a lot of that's from being, the producer of all these toys. Like the profit on the toys is just better than the profit on the comics. So he was at Toy Fair this last week in New York, I believe. And he's answering a lot of questions about, like upcoming stuff with Spawn. And people always want to ask him, what's happening with the movie. So that's one thing. We're still like, we're waiting with bated breath, Todd. Will this Spawn movie ever come out? And it's like, sometimes signs point to yes. Like when Joker comes out, is a fairly low budget R-rated character drama. with some name recognition, but makes $1 billion worldwide, that makes the sales pitch for a Spawn movie, I think, a little easier. Like, okay, Spawn could make some money. We spend $50 million on the budget, and it makes $1 billion, guaranteed. Well, we'll see. But we don't know. And it's actually, I guess, unfortunate. The latest piece of news is that I think McFarlane was trying to get an Academy Award-winning actor or actress. We don't know which one, man or woman, but I think speculation was that it was a female, and he was trying to get Halle Berry for the role of Wanda Simmons, Al Simmons' widow in the Spawn universe. But I think that didn't work out, unfortunately, because of scheduling. And isn't that always the way? But of course, that's just speculation on my part. I have no idea if Halle Berry was the name they were considering. But it would fit, right? You'd think that could be it. But then also in toy news, Todd's talking about he's going back to actually making Spawn toys. So this is like kind of a bit of a connection between the toys, the comics, the movies. McFarlane Toys, Todd's toy company, doesn't make a lot of like comic-based toys anymore. With one exception I'll get to in a second. But they do a lot of, like video game licenses, movie licenses. But unfortunately, like if you're a fan of the toys going back to the 90s, it's not a lot of Spawn toys. Not what got him to the party in the first place. It's what sells now. And I think he made the point that it would be an easier time to get, more Spawn toys made if there was a movie in the works. If there's a movie, then yeah, you can make some toys about that. Although if it's an R-rated movie, I don't know. Maybe not. But the other stuff that he's got like coming out now, like I don't buy a lot of these toys. That is to say, I buy none of these toys. I have a lot of the Spawn toys from the 90s from when I was growing up, but I'm not necessarily the market for the toys. Although there is one, he's saying, I'm going to do a Kickstarter for Spawn, the comic character. And I might do that. I might kickstart that Spawn figure, which is, he's saying it's going to be like a new version of the original Spawn figure from the 90s, but with everything he's learned about making toys since then, the better version of the figure. And it's like, I kind of want to encourage him to do more Spawn stuff, more comic stuff, more comic figure stuff. So I feel like I might help him kickstart that. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the pledge levels look like. I'll let you know. Todd. Caleb's also saying in the chat, when I say that, going back talking about the WB movies, I don't mean they don't make them, but they're not a fan of setting major franchises in the past because it means they have to shell out. This is like for Harry Potter, DC, Wonder Woman aside. Good exception to that. Wonder Woman aside, that was true that was a period piece. And I guess up to, it might still be technically the most profitable World War I film of all time. But, at least there's a little bit of competition now with 1917 that came out this last year. And I guess this new Wonder Woman sequel that I'm excited for does count as a period piece too, right? Because that's set in the 80s, which is always fun because, I love a good 80s soundtrack. And I love it when characters wear high-top sneakers. And I love going to the mall. Let's all go to the mall. So, anytime you want to set in the movie in the 80s, I am down for that. But fair point. I would get why, WB, or really any movie studio, wouldn't want to necessarily, like, put a lot of money into something like that, You want to make sure you get your money back. And, when even something like Justice League isn't a guaranteed profit, what can you say? Stressful. It's stressful making a movie, as Todd McFarlane is likely to learn if he ever gets his chance to direct that Spawn film. So also with the toys, the other stuff that's coming out, like I said, I'm not buying a lot of it, but I'm curious if anyone is a big fan of this stuff. Like they got Cyberpunk toys coming out for that video game that keeps getting delayed again and again. But they got like a Keanu Reeves Cyberpunk toy, I believe, coming out. And also, what was the other big license he's got? Oh, the one I want to talk about. This is crazy, right? Because Todd McFarlane Toys is now making Batman toys. They're making DC toys, which is crazy. And I asked Todd at one point, like at a convention, very briefly, because, it's like, he's got to keep the line moving. But I asked him, would you, like, if Batman was in the public domain, would you do your own Batman? He's like, I mean, I might, but it's got to look like the old Batman. It's got to look like the Batman from the 30s because it doesn't all just enter the public domain at once. But Todd, I think, found a way around it. He's not making Batman comics, but he's got the license for the DC toys, and I wonder, he's making these DC toys, Batman, Superman, The Flash, all these other characters. Will he at some point, what if, this is purely a what if, but what if AT&T, the parent company for DC, what if they shut everything down and they just leave it, they license the characters out to whatever other publisher wants to make those comics? Would Todd McFarlane put out Batman comics that he licensed through Image? That'd be really interesting. Would that get Todd to draw more regularly if he got to draw a Batman comic that he licensed from AT&T? I wonder. And they didn't have like direct editorial oversight. I think that would be the other thing. Like he might not bother to license it if they were going to like constantly be breathing down his neck in terms of, approving this or not approving this, that, the other thing. So I don't know, but that's, something that I wonder, like how much longer is it going to be where DC and even Marvel publish these characters in-house, and at one point will they say, maybe we'd just be better off licensing these characters to be published by, whoever wants them, whether that's IDW or Boom or whoever else. And sort of slightly connected with that, there's still been this whole last week, we talked about Dan DiDio, the co-publisher of DC, being fired. We mentioned that on this show last week, Comics, last Saturday. Talked about Dan DiDio getting fired and who should replace him. And there was, a bit of speculation. I think it was a lot of clickbait, honestly. I won't pull the same mean trick with this video. But there is some speculation that Joe Quesada might actually move over from from Marvel to DC, even though I don't know how tempted he would be because he's like an executive vice president at Marvel at this point. I think he's pretty well taken care of. I'm not sure what the temptation would be to move over to DC because, there's a lot of pressure being the publisher. And I don't know how much pressure his current job has or if it's, kind of a reward job for a job well done of being the editor-in-chief at Marvel more than a decade ago and steering the ship in the right direction at the time. But the speculation, I think, for why would Joe Quesada even move over to DC was just that he posted a sketch he did of Batman this week. He just posted that on Twitter, I think, without comment. So it immediately made people think like, oh, Batman. He's going to draw back. He's moving to DC. He's going to become the publisher. He owns DC. He's in charge now. But I don't know. I think that's all idle speculation at best. I really don't think Joe Quesada is moving over to become the publisher at DC. Although I am willing to eat those words if it turns out that he is doing so. All right, so I'm feeling like, even though I'm not quite done with this, I'm going to come back to this in a second. I do want to show you, everyone watching, that I am keeping with the birthday, give the birthday boy his props. Here is Superman. And this is actually an old illustration that I did that I hadn't finished yet, so I could do a little work on it right now. But this is based on a drawing by Olivier Coipel that he did for Action Comics 1000 a couple years ago that I bought a copy of. And again, it's really funny, depending on who you believe, Action Comics 1000 went on sale like 80 years to the day after Action Comics #1. And that's just depending on if you believe, certain testimony. And it's in like court documents from the Jerry Siegel, the Siegel and Schuster lawsuit against DC for ownership of Superman. But yeah, that was April 18th, 1938, and then April 18th, 2018. So again, I made the joke, like if we just say Superman's birthday is February 29th, it's on a leap year, then he is now finally, or next time he will finally be old enough to have a drink. He'll be 21, because I guess this is like, it would have to be he was born before 1938, right? When that first issue went on sale. So, because that wasn't a leap year. 1936 was. So yeah, he'd be 21 if not this time, maybe the time before. But what do you get for the man who has everything? It's a little callback to one. I don't think it was the first place. I think the first place that we found out, or that DC claimed Superman's birthday was February 29th, was in a calendar in 1976, like a DC Superstar calendar, something along those lines. And then they just started putting it in the comics. So it was also confirmed in, if you ever read Superman Annual number 11, which was written by Alan Moore, and the title of that issue is For the Man Who Has Everything. And it's, kind of a brutal birthday because Superman is like they put this flower on his chest. Mongul, the evil alien, puts a flower on his chest and makes him believe that he still has his family and they're all alive on Krypton. What a jerk, right? What a terrible evil alien. And then there's a great meme that's been made because Mongul says, happy birthday, Kryptonian. I bring you Oblivion. And like people have photoshopped in the video game Oblivion in Mongul's hand. Again, classic meme. Goes back more than a decade now. But yeah, that's why I say For the Man Who Has Everything. Anyway, it looks like we got some more people in the chat. Ms. Artgarten is here. Welcome. And she's saying, hey, I finally made it to one of your streams. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining the chat. And the Spider-Man was looking good. I like the Superman one too. Thank you for the lovely compliments on the art I'm working on today. I always appreciate it. It's so nice of you to say. And for those who don't know, Ms. Art Garden has her own great YouTube art channel, and I encourage everyone, if you have not done so yet, to go check out that channel. And also, subscribe and smash like on all her videos. And Caleb's also saying, I'm just worried about 5G. Replacing your most popular characters with less popular ones is not a smart move. I'll probably be buying Black Label comics when 5G comes out. You know what? This is a good point. For those who don't know what Caleb's talking about, 5G is the publishing initiative, which is supposedly going to start in October at DC and is going to be, I think, they're treating it as if it's like the fifth generation of heroes. Like if they actually appeared in 1937, 1938, we'd be a couple generations of heroes down the line. So now it's what? We have like retired Bruce Wayne, retired Clark Kent. We have a new Superman, a new Batman. I don't know. Is that what they're doing? I mean, they've tried this before. And like when I was a kid, say, they killed Superman. No one believed it. Well, actually, everyone believed it. I take that back. Everyone thought, for whatever reason, Superman would stay dead and that we could buy Superman 75, the comic book where he died, and then put it in a vault and use it to pay for college in 10 years. That is not what happened. I think you can get those fairly cheap these days. I mean, there were 8 million of them. But if you remember, they did replace Superman briefly with 4 replacement Superman. They had the Superboy, the Man of Steel, the good guys, and then they had the Eradicator, the bad guy, and the Cyborg, also another bad guy. So, are they going to do something like that again with 5G? I don't know. I'm curious what they do. But then on the other hand, they had legacy heroes that I think were a little more popular, a little more successful, like, say, Wally West, the Flash. That was, he's like the 3rd generation of Flash characters. And then you could say, like, Impulse is the 4th. And I liked both of them. They're great. So, you have some winners, you have some losers. We'll just see. I'm going to withhold judgment on 5G until I see it. I think the only preview we've seen is like the story and Wonder Woman 750, where that was like written by Jeff Johns with art by Brian Hitch, and Brian Hitch I think is great. So if Brian Hitch is on a 5G title, I am in all likelihood going to check that out. But Caleb, I understand the worry. To an extent, I'm worried too, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of like saying let's just reboot the universe. That's not really what. Yeah. And Ms. Artgarden says thanks for the shout out. Of course, I appreciate everything you do on your channel, and if there is some cross appeal between my art and yours, all the better. I hope that people can enjoy both channels. And also follow her on Twitter too, like I do. I'm sure the link is on her channel page. But yeah, some concerns about 5G. Although I think one of the big proponents of 5G was Dan DiDio, right? And he's gone. So are we still going to see the same push for these books, I gotta say I have no idea. Let's see. What else is going on Leap Day, February 29th? It's so funny. I actually know a couple people, family and friends, who were born on this day, and then a couple people who missed it on a day one way or the other. Like they were born the March 1st after or the February 28th before, and just missed it. Missed it by that much, as Maxwell Smart used to say. But it's funny, it's like, who Ryan Reynolds is, of course, the guy who plays Deadpool. But he's also got his own line of gin, aviation gin. And he's like, on his YouTube page, if you follow Ryan Reynolds on YouTube, you notice he did like a funny leap year thing this year where he was saying happy birthday to a woman who was born in 1936 on February 29th. So it was very much in my consciousness this week that, like, if you were born in 1936 on February 29th, then you are now of legal drinking age. So, like, that was the video Ryan Reynolds put up. And he also was, like, just had an open call. Hey, if you were born on February 29th, 1936, just get in touch with me. Ryan Reynolds, I want to hang out. I want to buy you your first legal drink. Technically legal. So that's funny. Just checking in on the chat again. Looks like Ms. Artgarden is saying that I definitely know my comic knowledge. I appreciate it. I think I do, but I don't want to sound too cocky about that. We should do a trade or a collab or something sometime. I agree. We should talk about that. We should figure out what would be a good art trade or collaboration for our channels. Let's discuss that. Let's table that and discuss that at a later time. But that would be a good idea. I absolutely agree. And also, I didn't know it was leap year until my computer told me this morning. I'm so out of the loop. LOL. Yeah, I've actually been looking forward to it. But I didn't have any strong plans. I know for some people, I saw this was trending on Twitter. For some people, leap year is an opportunity to watch their favorite Amy Adams romantic comedy, Leap Year, which I've never seen. I don't know anything about it, although I assume it's about finding true love if it's a romantic comedy. I don't know. So that's, for some people, the tradition. Other than that, I don't know. What would you even do on leap year besides celebrate Superman's birthday? All right, I'm going back to the Spidey Spawn mashup I was working on. At the very least, I'm going to get this finished for sure. And then we'll see if there's much else going on in terms of the chat. But otherwise, if I just work on these two drawings today, I feel that's a pretty good stream. But I do want to finish this up. I want to see what this looks like once I get all the inking in. Also, for those keeping score at home, this is now the 4th week in a row where I have not seen Birds of Prey in the theater. So if you were checking in for that, no, I still have not seen it. And it's looking more and more like it's going to be a home video watch for me. I will eventually see it, but I did not see that. And again, upcoming, I am looking forward a bit to Bloodshot. And funny, interesting McFarlane connection there. McFarlane Toys is doing a Bloodshot action figure, but he was saying, McFarlane said at Toy Fair this last week that they were holding off on expanding that line and doing more than just the Bloodshot figure because they want to see how popular is this character. And he talked about like basically being burned before with the license where they did Shrek toys. And really people only wanted Shrek and maybe a donkey. But besides that, they didn't really want the other Shrek toys. They just wanted the Shrek character. And as far as he thought, it might be the same for Bloodshot. Like people just want that main character. But I don't know. I'm kind of looking forward to that movie and all the TV commercials and advertising I've seen for it just makes it look good, and I trust Vin Diesel. I've already admitted I'm a super big Fast and Furious fan, so I like it when he does these side projects too. But I will check that out in the next couple weeks. But besides that, can I make jokes about coronavirus? I don't want to step on any toes. I don't want to offend anybody, especially if you know friends or family who have come down with it and gotten these flu-like symptoms. But, I'm not quite at the point where I'm hiding out in my house. But I have been making suggestions to Alana, like, hey, it's like if we talk about, we can go out to see a movie, or like, hey, honey, how about, we watch a movie at home tonight, because of the coronavirus. We gotta avoid that. So again, not to make fun of a possible pandemic situation. But it is to an extent driving our decisions about like, do we go out to see a movie? Do we stay home and see a movie? But we're not at the point yet where we're like stocking up on canned goods and spaghetti. Although I did see a tweet that kind of alarmed me for a second. Someone said on Twitter, like, should I be alarmed that there is no more pasta at the grocery store? They're all sold out. I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. That would kind of freak me out. But at this point, can I just say, I don't think we're in an outbreak situation or a contagion situation. Or, you know, they remake that movie of, or Stephen King's The Stand. They remake this movie of a flu wiping out the world, you know, every 10 to 15 years. So don't be surprised if there is a coronavirus movie, 2022, in a theater near you, after the worst has passed. But also, if you're old enough, you remember, say, like swine flu, avian bird flu. Like every once in a while, there's something that freaks people out. But how big of a deal is it? Let's just say big enough for me to have that as my excuse this week. I did not go see Birds of Prey because of concerns about the flu. All right, checking it on the chat. Caleb's saying Amy Adams was wasted in Batman versus Superman. She got a great character introduction in Man of Steel, but they really dropped the ball with BVS and Justice League. I remember that one weird scene in Justice League where they talk about, they said, like, Ma Kent is talking to Lois Lane, right? And she says something about, like, you're a great reporter because you're so thirsty. Hungry. And it's like, that's the joke, right? Like, because it's like, if you're thirsty, that means something else, right? Wink, wink. But if you're hungry, it's like you're hungry for the story. That's better. So if that's what we're talking about, maybe that's like an example of like cringe comedy and the actress being wasted. And she is an Academy Award winning actress, right? So they should give her more to do. But also, you know, especially with Justice League, it's such a crowded movie. And even Batman vs. Superman, if you got Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman as like the leads, then people, you know, like Jimmy Olsen or the not quite Jimmy Olsen in the movie who gets killed. Ooh, I shouldn't laugh at that. In Batman vs. Superman or Lois Lane, you know, they're just not going to get the best character moments in a film that's already overcrowded. And where Lex Luthor, Jesse Eisenberg, is chewing up all the scenery. But yeah, Amy Adams certainly could have gotten better treatment in these movies. It's not quite if we compare again to the 70s, Margot Kidder, I think, got a much better role to play with that Lois Lane. What else? And Ms. Artgard is saying, I agree with Caleb. She's a good actor. She deserved better. Netflix subscriptions supposedly went up, and they're giving credit to the coronavirus. That's funny. So that's coronavirus news. I'll take that. That's Netflix subscriptions have gone up in price, and they're saying, sorry, guys, it's the coronavirus. We had to do it. You hate to see it happen. So is this like they know they've got more of a captive audience because everyone is staying home to watch Netflix? Which I feel like Alon and I have run out of the things to watch on Netflix. We've gone through basically everything. We watched a lot of those reality shows of like the people falling in love, or that one they did where no one ever met, The Circle. And then we watched some stuff, like she got really into Outlander, and I got a little bit into Outlander. And she got so into it that we ended up getting Starz too, the streaming service, just to catch up with the most recent 2 seasons of Outlander. So now I've been watching more stuff on Starz, and they've got some pretty good movies. Like, I'm happy with the Starz package because they're going to have like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood next month, so that'll be fun to watch again. And they got a bunch of old movies that I've never seen before that I'm checking out for the first time that I had been meaning to. Like, for one, I meant to say this. I finally watched Peter Pan from 2003. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but this is, you know, people been telling me for almost decades now, 15 years, like, oh yeah, this is a pretty good version of Peter Pan. It's worth watching. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll get around to it. And I watched it, and it is pretty good. It's like, the casting is incredible. I mean, these kids they're adults now. They're in their 20s, I guess. Maybe even in their 30s. They might have been teenagers when they filmed it, but young-looking teenagers. Like the kid who played Peter Pan in 2003, Jeremy Sumpter, I was just looking up trivia for the film. Good film, I recommend it, especially if you got stars. But they said he grew like 8 inches while they were filming, so they kept having to resize the window in the Darling household because it kept looking wrong. He kept like bonking his head on it. So that was kind of funny. It's like, but that's the challenge when you work with child actors is, they might hit their growth spurt, and then your production is it's in trouble unless you resize that window. But that was a lot of fun, and I guess other pieces of trivia there. It was besides a Russian production, it was like the first Peter Pan where they actually used they cast a young boy, whereas traditionally it's like a woman would play Peter Pan in the theater. But they also did another fun thing where it's like usually Mr. Darling and Captain Hook is played by the same actor when it's on the stage, and it was the same for this one, for the 2003 version. So I like it. I'm not sure I like it better than the 2015 version, which is called Pan. But the 2015 version is just so nuts. Like, if you've never seen that, it's Hugh Jackman as Captain Hook, or is it Captain Blackbeard? They might change the pirate's name in that one. But when he comes out, they do Nirvana. They do Smells Like Teen Spirit as like this weird musical interlude in that Pan film. And that's so nuts that I think I got to give it the edge. I really like that. I think it's been since I was a kid that I saw Hook. And maybe it's time to go back and check out that one again. And it's been a while since I've seen even the Disney version. Or the cartoon version that was on Fox, if you remember that. Fox's Peter Pan and the Pirates. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of versions of Peter Pan. And the one from 2003 was not bad. But more than anything, it reminds me of a quote from Jordan Vogt Roberts, who is, you may know as the director of King Kong, or Kong Skull Island was the title. That's that Kong. And he says that basically any movie that gets made, it's a miracle. If it's decent, it's a double miracle. And if it's a great movie, that's a triple miracle. And I think there's something to that. I absolutely believe that. And so it's like, even I'll say a decent movie, a 3-star movie like Peter Pan from 2003, it's a double miracle. It's as good as it is because there's just so many things working against, making an entertaining film. And the other film I watched this week, not very comic book centric, but the only other movie I watched this week that I hadn't seen before was All the Money in the World, about the Getty kidnapping. It's based on a true story from the 70s, like the grandson of multi-billionaire J.P. Getty, the oil magnate. His grandson was kidnapped, and I guess this was real event. So it's this movie directed by Ridley Scott, starring Mark Wahlberg, and it was pretty good. But it's only, damning with faint praise here. It's only a double miracle. It's only decent. It's not incredible, and it's certainly not as incredible as some of the really amazing stuff that Ridley Scott has done, like the original Alien movie, of course. Looks like Ms. Artgarden's got a suggestion. You're saying I should check out Narcos when I get a chance. And I don't think you're the first person to recommend that to me, so I will. I will put that on at some point soon and check it out. I think there's multiple seasons to that. So a perfect binge opportunity. It's funny, not speaking of binge opportunity, but talking about most of the TV and movies I watch, and I'm sure this is true for everyone here, and just most anyone, is like most of the TV we watch probably is through streaming apps now, whether it's Hulu or Netflix. But I turn on my TV we turn on our TV, Alana and I, for network TV for like 2 different things. And one of those things is The Bachelor on Monday nights. She's super into that. And the other thing is Saturday Night Live. And tonight, if you did not know, is a new episode of Saturday Night Live with one of my favorite hosts, John Mulaney, who I'm not saying I look a lot like John Mulaney, but if you told me there was a resemblance, I wouldn't be shocked. And even more so, the musical host tonight, the musical guest, is David Byrne. And I have been told before that I look like David Byrne. I'm not sure. Maybe age me up 30 years and I'll get there. So it's just kind of weird to me. Again, I'm not saying I look exactly like these guys, but there is a passing similarity between me and the host and the musical guests on SNL tonight. But I'm looking forward to that. John Mulaney's been making the interview rounds this week. And he is always he's always a good watch. I think he's a great host, no matter how average how average an average episode of SNL is. I think it's great when he's on. But we'll see. I hate to oversell it, and then everyone tunes in tonight, and it's like, oh man, Evan on YouTube told me that this was going to be great, and it's only okay. I don't know. But I am looking forward to that. And it's appointment television for me. I like to watch it live. So, and Ms. Art Garden's giving me a little warning on Narcos. It's a little bit dark. You've been warned. Okay. I'll take that into consideration. I'm not that alarmed by it. There's only a couple films, I won't even name them. They're too dark that really I find like traumatizing. And then besides that, most everything at this point, like, I'm over the point now where it's like, say when I was a kid, the first Critters movie was scary. And at this point, I'm kind of over that. I'm no longer alarmed by things like Troll 2 or Critters or the Friday the 13th movies, most typical horror films. But also, if we're just talking dark in terms of, mature subject matter, that's kind of similar to, like, All the Money in the World, that kidnapping movie was kind of dark too. So I might say, warning on that, there's some graphic violence in there if you ever choose to watch that one. And, the subject matter of the kidnapping is kind of dark too. As well as the grandfather's reaction. Minor spoiler for All the Money in the World. J.P. Getty was like, no, I'm not going to pay the ransom. You can forget about my grandson. Who cares? I'm not going to negotiate with kidnappers. So yeah. But thank you for the warning. All right, so I'm getting close to the end here. And if there are no other questions or comments in the stream, I'm going to get close to wrapping it up. I am going to finish up coloring this Spider-Man, get his arm and his mask, get the cape on the other side of Spawn colored up, and that'll be it. So I think I should go into the YouTube sales pitch. You've all heard it before, and you're about to hear it again. You know how it goes. If you like this video, please smash like. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, hey, now's as good a time as ever. Why not? Subscribe to the channel, tap the bell for notifications. I like to go live. I've been keeping a schedule of coming in Saturday evenings and Wednesday mornings. I review new comics, mostly X-Men comics, Wednesday morning. And then Saturday is kind of a catch-all for a news roundup. Was there anything else that happened this week that I got to talk about? But yeah, I'd love to have more people join in. Let's see. Oh, there is, again, also some speculation with casting. I'll mention this before I go. Alison Brie might be She-Hulk. She's in talks to play She-Hulk on Disney+. I would be okay with that. As far as casting goes, if they get Alison Brie as She-Hulk, could be interesting. I would watch that show. I'm probably going to watch it regardless, but that could work for me. Let me know what you think. And then besides that, let's see, anything else? Oh yeah, in X-Men news, they announced, if you went to the Chicago convention this weekend, C2E2, I did not, but I read about the news online, which is just as good. The X-Men panel, they announced the X-Men crossover for this summer. It's going to be 10 of swords. And what's going on? It's like the letter X, but again, it's 10, like Powers of 10. It wasn't Powers of X, it's Powers of 10. It's not X of Swords or Cross of Swords, although that would work too. It's 10 of Swords. And what's going to happen? You guessed it, the X-Men all get swords. So that should be exciting. I'm looking forward to it. But I will probably talk about that in more detail on Wednesday when I focus more on X-Men stuff. So join me then. And again, very much thank you to everyone that joined in and watched this live. I really appreciate it. I always appreciate the feedback as we go. And people who check it out later. I also appreciate a comment if you want to leave one below after the stream is over. And I hope everyone had a great leap day. And a great leap month and a great now I'm stumbling over myself. A great leap year. I just hope it's a great 2020 all around. So far, so good, right? My 2020 is going all right. And I hope it's the same for my audience. And you know what? Even though I finished up the colors here, I won't end on this. I'll show you, if you're curious, a little bit at the end here, what else I've been working on. So this is roughly colored. And the rest of this page, basically empty. But you see here, this other page I've been working on, my original, my OC, my character, the Polar Commander. Just imagine a polar bear, but he's also kind of a battle armor military general type character. So I've been working on this, and probably do more with this in the future. But that's what else I've been working on. And again, I appreciate everyone joining in. That's it for tonight. Ms. Art Garden says, good stream. I hope you had a great night. All the art looks really great. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate everything. And thanks for joining me. I'll see everyone next time. So have a good one.